The Cannabis Conversation. A European perspective on the emerging legal cannabis industry.
Welcome to the Cannabis Conversation with the News Decide, where we explore the new legal cannabis industry by speaking to the professionals that are helping to shape it. Today's show is a bumper bonus show. It's a first for the Cannabis Conversation. I have 4 guests today. Not only 4 guests, but the best female management team in the business. I have the senior management team of Southwest Brands with me. I have Rebekah Hall, who's the CEO, Jolyn Teo, who's the CFO, Fran Pierce, who's the brand and marketing director, and last but not least, Hannah Skingle, previous guest, who's the operations director. Welcome, ladies. How are you?
Great.
Yes.
Great to be here.
Happy to be here.
No, really pleased to have you on the show and that we can do it in person. It's really nice to have this. Loads to talk about today. Branding is big in CBD, and we'll get on to the ins and outs of that in a second. But why don't we start with the usual and talk about each of you individually and a bit about your backgrounds. Jolyn, do you want to start? You're sitting next to me. You can go first.
Oh, right. Wow. Great to be here. Thank you for having us. Well, I'm probably the only person around the table who fell into cannabis quite by accident. I have known Rebekah, the founder and CEO of this business, for a number of years. We have worked together in previous ventures, and really just that's carried through into this business, which I am so excited and so thrilled to be a part of. I think Southwest is just really going to transform how consumers look at cannabis products. There's nothing in the market like that right now. And so that's how I've landed up here. My background is in capital markets. I had a previous life in equity fund management and equity sales at Goldman Sachs. I did that for 14 years. Yes, that always gets me raised eyebrows around the room. I started, I'm originally from Singapore. So I started at Goldman Sachs in Singapore as a fund manager, and then spent a bit of time in New York on the trading floor before coming across to London doing the same job in equity sales. Eventually had enough, quit, decided to start working with startups and in various capacities. I find it really interesting. It's really where you get to move the needle with businesses and, watch transformation happen. And so here I am, and I think to date this is still, the one project I'm most excited about, and I think we have a superb team across the table.
Brilliant. And if I can ask, how did you find coming from a, very serious corporate to the start, not just the startup world, but, cannabis, CBD?
Well, I think ultimately it really comes down to the people you work with, and that makes all the difference. And, prior to this, I've worked in various, small businesses as well. It's really the people that make the difference. And I've been fortunate. I've always had, really good experiences with various teams I've worked in. I have to say this team right now is just right up there, cannabis or not. The thing is, and bear in mind, I'm sure we'll delve into this in due course, but we're a business that's been built during COVID. Everyone's been in remote locations, kind of in their own makeshift home office, but we're just getting things done. And that's so refreshing. And I do love that I think you see that a lot more in small businesses where, things just have to move fast. You don't have a choice. You have to adapt. You have to respond very quickly, and you're always under-resourced. That's just, fact of life. But that forces everybody to really pull together and move forward very quickly.
Brilliant.
And I love that. I think we all thrive on that. It's chaos some days, but,
That's the fun bit.
Some days.
That is the fun bit.
Most days.
Yeah, that's fine.
Good to hear. And so we'll hear a bit more about Southwest in a second, but going around the table, Fran, do you want to go next?
Yeah, cool. Okay, so I'm Fran Pierce. I've been a brand and marketing sort of in the industry for over 20 years, which really scares me because I suddenly realise I'm getting very old. Kind of like cut my teeth in comms. So I was like a PR hound for years, absolutely loved it. Put Richard Branson in a pair of boxer shorts and basically told him to F you to BA, which is one of my favourite moments. It happened on the day Margaret Thatcher died, one of my saddest moments. I then kind of went over and cut my teeth in like the whole world of brand, and I worked at Superdry for 5 years. So I kind of went from like agency set up over to what was then a PLC and was kind of on this massive global expansion, but was very much still run as an entrepreneurial startup, which obviously therefore really helped me when I went into the world of entrepreneurial startups, which is where I went after Superdry. So I did around 4 years there, kind of like just sort of working my way up to do kind of like the global like brand marketing job, which is really exciting. Got to travel a lot, work with some amazing people, did a lot of work with Idris Elba, another big collabs, which is super fun. And then thought, oh, I've never done startup. And actually, like, it's crazy because I always say to people, you should only do it, babes, if you've got the right constitution, because it's a scary, mad world. But I went and worked for an amazing business called Smith & Sinclair. And it was bonkers alcohol cocktail innovation that we did there, which so I was so out of my comfort zone and doing quite crazy stuff. And so during that time period, the reason they were able to bring me on was because they'd had investment from Subversive Capital, who you may or may not know, but that's Brendan Kennedy from Tilray and some other guys. So they'd kind of invested in Smith & Sinclair, and then obviously we're watching what we were doing, and we're like, actually, we think what you're doing is great, and we'd really like you to come and help us build a CBD brand. So we got acquired by Tilray and kind of went and helped them set up Pollen. So that was how I got into CBD. So I kind of I sort of knew about it, kind of was dabbling in it a little bit myself because it was kind of super helpful for some of my own wellness needs. But I kind of got massively into it, both from like kind of loving the landscape of it, but also how really, really important I think the ingredient genuinely is. Like, I use it daily. I tell everybody to use it. So fortuitously, that was where I then met Rebekah Hall and Hannah Skingle. Because obviously when you're on the CBD circuit, there's only 90 rocking around, especially when you're a woman. So I ended up doing a talk with Rebekah, and we kind of like bonded. And I think we were both a bit like, oh my God, she's really cool. Like, she's too cool for me. I can't speak to her. So I didn't feel that I could really speak to her that much. And then Hannah and I met at another event that was actually here. We talked together. Yeah. And kind of, I suppose that was where I really got into the industry. I then went and did a bit of consulting, and kind of, because I was really enjoying the whole startup thing, I was kind of then supporting smaller brands that were kind of looking to, I suppose, take themselves to the next level. Maybe they were trying to get investment, or they were trying to kind of scale up and professionalize what they were doing. So I went and did that, and then Rebekah kind of appeared one day and was like, "Hi, babes, what are you up to?" In Soho House, and the rest, as they say, is history.
That is brilliant. High energy, moving to the calming world of CBD.
That's why I need it, babes. Like, can you imagine what I'm like when I haven't had my CBD?
This is perfect. And a wonderful segue, as we thank you for that, Fran.
Thank you.
As we go to Commander-in-Chief, Rebekah.
I hate following Fran.
It's not going to be easy.
When I first met Fran, she came before me in a presentation. I was like, how can I follow that? It's so high energy. I feel like suddenly the boring person in the room. I'm Rebekah Hall. I'm the CEO and founder of this business, this motley crew. So my background was I spent 10 years in corporate finance, M&A, small and mid-cap M&A, and I had the pleasure of working for a number of entrepreneurs, which gives you that horrible entrepreneurial itch. And I eventually gave up my job and started a consumer brand called Botanic Lab, in the functional drink space. And that was really where I cut my teeth in brand and consumer and learned a lot of the hard and dirty lessons at the coalface of building brand. At a time when health and wellness was a relatively new construct in the UK in mainstream food and drink. So an emerging market and all of the sort of challenges and exciting things that come with that. And that was really my introduction to cannabis as well, because we became the first brand in Europe to put CBD into a drink. So I got sort of launched into this weird and wonderful world of cannabis and CBD and all the characters within it, and really became quite enamored by it because it's, it's such an exciting nascent industry. There's a kind of odd bunch of people sometimes that operate in it, but huge amounts of opportunity, albeit that there's been a very twisted road over the last few years, a frustrating twisted road over the last few years. But as a kind of entrepreneur to the core, that's really what's fired my interest in how we can take this huge opportunity that I think is the most exciting thing to happen to consumer products in a lifetime, and really build a business that takes account of all of the things I know are difficult about building brand because I've done them myself, and does that on a bigger scale in a more efficient way, knowing what the window of opportunity is in this industry. And that's really how Southwest was born, out of the desire to do that with myself and my fellow shareholders. But my sort of number one priority in doing that was I need the superstar team, and I need the superstar team from within the industry and without the industry as well. We are a consumer brands business, so we need consumer brands experts and we need cannabis experts, and hence the people around this table who were handpicked by me, and I was lucky enough that they accepted the challenge to come on board. So we're super proud of what we're building. We've got a really exciting 6 months, 12 months ahead of us, and we'll talk a bit more about that over the next few minutes.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. And I mean, just we move on to the star of the show, Hannah. How important is it that, the female management team? Sadly, the industry isn't hugely diverse.
No.
And so, how important is that aspect?
Yeah, look, diversity in the workplace is a huge topical point right now, not just gender diversity, but all other types of diversity. It wasn't intentional that we ended up with an all-women management team. I just wanted the best people for the job, and that's where we landed, and we happen to be all women. I'd be lying if I said that I don't know that it's a novelty and one that we'll obviously use to the max benefit. But it wasn't intentional. I think... I come from an industry in banking that is not particularly diverse, certainly not when I started in the industry 20 years ago. There's been some improvement since then. So I'm used to working in those environments. I think the cannabis industry is very similar to that. I think there's a lot of the same voices in the industry to its detriment. I think we need diversity of thought, diversity of voice, diversity of experience in the industry. We need people from outside to come in, particularly in consumer products and consumer brands, where a lot of the things and the practices that we're going to be doing aren't new information. They're just experience and knowledge from outside of this bubble of an industry. So I think I'm very proud of the fact that we're an all-woman management team. We've just appointed a female chair as well, because I think it's important for that to go all the way through to board representation, shareholder representation as well. We are majority owned by women. So I think it's an important statement for this industry, and I hope it will follow in terms of the way other people build their teams and look to diversity. And certainly one of the things that we're looking to do in the business, and Hannah can talk a bit more about this later, is make sure we see that diversity at all levels and across all different parts of the business. Again, not just gender diversity, but across the board. Yeah, no, absolutely. And we really welcome breath of fresh air for the industry, I think. Absolutely. We hope so.
So on to Hannah. Thank you for joining us again.
Welcome
back.
Much.
It's a long time ago when you were on the show, maybe 2 years ago.
It has been, a couple of years, I think.
How are you getting on?
Good. Very good. Really chuffed to be, sitting here, moving out of the hardcore manufacturing role into much more brand focus. I think that's definitely needed. I mean, got a lot of experience from Dragonfly learning about vertically integrated businesses, understanding the grow, extraction, etc. But this is refreshing and also very fun, as you can probably tell.
It's canned laughter I'm adding to this, by the way. Absolutely. So, when you were Dragonfly when you were last on the show, but tell us about how you came to be at Southwest.
Well, I was working at the time for my own consultancy. I was doing a lot of regulatory compliance stuff, looking under the bonnet of other CBD brands and cannabis companies. It was really, really enjoyable, really insightful, but what I really wanted was, to do something a bit more strategic, a bit more commercial on the retail brand side. And very fortunately, Rebekah called me. She promised me she would call me just before the end of the year. She called me on the 31st of December.
Really making you sweat.
It's in my diary.
Yeah. So, when she offered me the opportunity, I thought, this is great. This is something I really want to do, and a team I want to join. So started in March, and it's been great.
Fantastic. Well, congratulations on the new role. We'll get into a bit about what you're up to now. So Rebekah, why don't you tell us about what Southwest does and what your vision is?
Yeah, so Southwest Brands, the clue is in the name, brand, and we are laser focused on brand. Brand in the consumer world is the jewel in the crown for lots of different reasons, but it's the real value driver in consumer, and that's where we're absolutely focused, is in building value in brands. And I think when we look at the cannabis industry as a whole, there's been a real neglect of brand, both in terms of talent and investment in that. The industry has been somewhat dominated by this vertically integrated cannabis approach, which sounds great and has its merits, but also, in my opinion, has led to a neglect of the last part of that consumer journey. The seed to shelf moniker in itself doesn't take account of the most important bit of that, which is moving the product off the shelf time and time again and appealing to the consumer. And that's what this industry really needs to fire demand for the rest of the chain. So what we do in our business is that we own and develop brand IP at the heart of what we do. So we're brand marketeers. But we do that in a way that is very capital efficient. We work with partners to take those brands to market through licensing deals. And that means that we get a quality across the whole of the value chain of the exceptional kind of quality of our partners, but we have the quality of the brand and marketing piece at the end of the spectrum where we are. So what we want to do is to be able to really connect to the consumer, get them excited about these products and this ingredient, but do that in a way that's very CPG first, as we would say. So these aren't CBD brands, they're consumer brands. And at the very heart of what we do is identifying a consumer need and filling that consumer need first, rather than putting cannabis in a bottle and putting it on the shelf. The way that we're doing that is smart, and it's informed by, a lot of my learnings from building brands and a lot of my partners' learnings from building brands. So we've thought very deeply about the most efficient capital structure to do this and the most efficient way to go to market, so that we can be really focused on the thing that we do best, which is appealing to the consumer.
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, CBD as an ingredient rather than just the product, I think, is where this needs to go, which is great. And how broad is your approach to, what's the single unifying factor? Is it CBD, or do you do things with hemp protein, or, what's your universe?
I mean, obviously recreational is not something that we're interested in at this stage. So CBD for health and wellness is our thing. So if it can have CBD in it, we're interested in it. But the starting point for us is, as I said, where are there underserved areas of consumer need? Where are brands not serving the 21st century consumer at the moment? And if there's one of those areas and it's potentially high margin and high volume, we're interested in it. The next question is, can CBD be utilised in that area effectively in the product mix? And that really defines our universe of interest from a consumer's perspective. So as you would imagine, we've gone through a relatively detailed process of identifying where those consumer segments are that we're focused on. And then, do we want to build a brand of our own in that, or do we want to acquire a brand that already exists and build on that value? So our model is to have a combination of acquisition and development of our own brands.
So that kind of like a pseudo incubator, accelerator?
It's sort of. I mean, we're interested in the brand IP specifically, rather than the whole operational structures of these businesses. But yeah, a pseudo investment house might be one way of explaining it.
Yeah. Great, cool. Well, thank you. And maybe you want to talk a bit about some of the brands that you're working with currently.
Cool. Okay, I can start with that. So obviously, goes without saying that we have the fantastic Botanic Lab. So the brainchild of Rebekah Hall has come over to Southwest Brands, and we'll be kind of working on that piece. We've given it a bit of a refresh. We firmly put it in the 21st century, and we're really thinking about our Gen Z consumer. It's no and low for them. They're looking for different ways to kind of relax. And we really want Botanic Lab to be seen as that kind of social lubricant, as Rebekah puts it so nicely. So I steal it now as if it were my own. So we've kind of got that and some really nice ambitious plans around how we're going to kind of drive that to build more of a community feel around it. And then we have two brand new babies that we have created ourselves, which I will try and give a little bit of information on without too much away. So, like we said, everything that we do is based on insight and very much focused on kind of white spaces in consumer goods groups, right? So areas where we think, right, these brands don't exist. And like we said, the kind of our mission as an organisation is that it's about purpose first and plant second. So CBD is super important and it's an amazing holistic ingredient, but it comes afterwards once we've identified this consumer need. And also what we're also doing with each of our kind of product portfolios is smartly weaving in other holistic and active ingredients so that the CBD isn't always the star of the show. So it might be CBD and retinol. It might be CBD and hyaluronic acid. Okay. Yes. Etc. So kind of it's in there as the anchor. Sometimes it's not in there. There's a couple of products that don't. But it kind of is I suppose, the framework for the brands. So, 2 brands launching imminently. Not stressed in the slightest. So we have, first our kind of Gen Z self-love brand, Love Me, 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 which is a beautiful indulgent range of self-care products. It's all around me time, but actually the purpose of the brand is a lot more focused on, it's great to take some time for yourself, but actually it's more about how you love yourself and look after yourself to present the best version of you. So it looks incredible. The aesthetic is amazing. And the focus is very much on kind of a digital native. We're going after that Gen Z. So the focus in terms of all the work we're doing is around TikTok, Instagram, all those right channels to get to that audience. So that will be coming in August. And then hotly on its heels is Few, which is a really exciting proposition actually, because it doesn't exist on the market at all at this stage. So we're quite proud to say we're truly going to come in and disrupt this wellness space. So we have kind of created a brand centered on the menstrual cycle. And actually not just your period, because there are loads of amazing brands out there that are completely disrupting that space. We don't want to come in and take that space because it's been done fantastically well. What we want to do is create a complement of products that work alongside it. So we've looked at kind of 5 different areas within the menstrual cycle, and different products that can support, because each week you feel very different. And actually it's been a bit of an eye-opener for all of us in terms of that, because half the time we're like, oh God, that's why I didn't sleep, or that's why I felt so worried last week. When you can actually track it to your cycle and your hormones, it's quite an empowering place to be. So so that's the second brand. That will be shortly after Love Me, Me, Me. And then I think Rebekah's going to put me on a super tight timeline to get a few more out by the end of the year.
You got another 2 coming in the next 6 months.
So maybe we can come back in 6 months' time and I can tell you about those as well.
So it sounds quite relaxed and not
It's
rushed.
actually relatively, easy. Sometimes me and Hannah have nothing to do all day. We have to find jobs, don't we?
We really do.
That's great. So thank you, Fran. Hannah, do you want to maybe take the next one, which is sort of talking about the idea of this, and you kind of alluded to it, but the focus on it actually being a CBG product rather than CBD as the focus. How are you seeing that, particularly with your background and things that you've done?
Well, it's definitely a different approach to, obviously, where I've come from and very core CBD products. I think it's also really, really important. I think, the market in the UK is really flourished with kind of white label CBD tinctures. I think there's a lot of confusion to the consumer groups. We talk previously a lot about education. We hammered that home. How can we educate the consumer? Well, I think we have to go brand first and then, CBD second, because otherwise you don't really know where you stand. I don't know if Rebekah wants to go more into CPG.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Everyone knows that the consumer needs educating. It's the big topic of conversation. Everyone needs to understand what CBD is, but I think slightly missing the point, which is that when you go to your local boot shelf and you see a load of tinctures on the shelf, and they can't really say what they do on the pack, and they're not really something that you use in your everyday life, and they probably cost £50 or more, it's a really hard push to get the consumer to buy into that. So I think we have to think more about what are the products that fit into people's lifestyles rather than wanting to force this CBD around people's necks. And I think that the way we come at it is, yes, you're limited in what you can say about CBD, but you're also limited about a lot of other ingredients that people sell on the market. There's nothing new. And yes, you're limited in some advertising mediums. That's one of the reasons why we use and will use advocacy of talent and influencers to sell these products, because actually we want to be able to translate that message in a way that consumers really understand and engage with. Just because you can't write something on the pack is not the end of the road, right? So I think, our approach, as I said to you before, is to take a step back and how would you do this outside of this industry? How would Unilever do this with their products? Let's use some of the knowledge that already exists in the market rather than trying to reinvent the wheel here. Yes, it's a complex ingredient. Yes, we have to make sure we work with the right partners and do the right things in that regard and have the highest quality product. But let's bring into that this real solid CPG expertise about how you move products off shelf and how you appeal to consumers. And that's so much broader now for a 21st century consumer. If you were looking at this 20, 30 years ago, it was probably enough to have a nice product in a nice package and people might buy it. But the consumer wants so much more now, right? They want to know, where has it come from? How did it get there? Do the brand values align with my own? What good is it going to do from doing this? Every consumer wants to know this now in the 21st century. So that's a trend in broader consumer goods. So we have to be paying attention to that. We have to be paying attention to sustainability. We have to be paying attention to the impact that our products are having, the impact that our team are having, the construct of our team, and whether that reflects, the values of our consumers. All these things are really core to selling product. It's a pretty complex world out there in consumer. So I think we're taking this up a notch, away from let's put a tincture on a shelf and call it CBD and sell it on the basis of the fact that it's cannabis in there. We're taking this to a whole different level, which is actually let's create consumer brands in the way that people are doing in other industries. We mentioned Oatly earlier. Let's take examples from some of these brands in how they're engaging with consumers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this applies to the general cannabis industry and not trying to reinvent the wheel, actually understanding wider established ways of doing things. So I think it's great. And we'll get on in a second to the general topic of branding, and you guys can give us a bit of a 101 on what all that means. But before we move on to that, Hannah, do you want to talk to us a bit about B Corp? You guys are looking at that?
Yeah, for sure. So, just as an overview, B Corp is a metric assessment for responsible businesses. It really is kind of the metric that most companies are looking to use now. I think, historically we've gone through different types. There's been metrics made by consultancy companies, but this is an independent owned and it's a real rigorous testing process. So it's based from about 250 questions or points of interest that you have to go away and answer in a lot of detail. You have to get 80 points in order to become B Corp. The highest B Corp in the world has got 121. So I think that just indicates like how challenging it is. But what it really does is it assesses all the different parts of your business. So it's not just about sustainability. It's also about your governance, how you treat your people, how are you responsible overall as an entity, and what is your mission? As I think what we have a lot in the cannabis space and CBD in particular, we'll talk a lot about hemp as a great product, absorbing more CO2 than the cotton plant, like 6 times or, whatever that is. But we negate the fact that we use ethanol or CO2 extraction and we try and sell it to the consumer as, this ethical, responsible product. But really, what does that mean? And I don't think that really conveys to the consumer at the moment. Whereas with Southwest Brands, we are looking to do B Corp across all of our brands. And this will allow us to have a stamp on it. It's something that consumers recognise. It also shows that you've actually put in the effort and you know what you're talking about. You get audited every 3 years, so you have to, really keep that up. And the process takes about a year to 18 months to actually complete.
Yeah. Wow, that's fantastic. I know a couple of businesses going through that process. It's not easy, so good that you guys are on it. And look forward to hearing how that all pans out. And hopefully you get your stamp soon. So thank you for that, Hannah. Right, so here is the main bit, branding. Let's understand all about that. Fran, I'm going to look to you a lot for this. Let's do a bit of 101. What is branding? Why is it important? I know it's more than just the name and the logo. What does it actually mean?
I guess I suppose when I think about branding, I think about the development of a brand. When I think about the development of a brand, I think about the creation of a community and a want and a desire for something that far surpasses what anyone else is doing. And like my example, just in terms of like, let's say sunglasses, I wear Ray-Bans, right? When I put Ray-Bans on, I feel like a bad beep. I just do, and I feel like it turns me into a rock star. I don't know what they've done to me over the last 20 years because they don't even do that much marketing, right? But they've built their brand so successfully that I feel like intrinsically, I know Jolyn's got a pair today.
We've all
Let me
got
get your Ray-Bans out, please, guys. Yeah. And that's for me kind of like brand. Okay, so there's something about this kind of want and desire of something over another, where there are two things on the market, right? Because everything exists in multiple formats. It's what they do that makes you think that's a bit of me. I feel part of that. I agree with their values. I buy into that. That aesthetic feels like it's something I want to be desirable.
It's almost like religion, isn't it? It's like the religious element of a product.
Yeah, it totally is. And like you see somebody else with it and you're like, that's my kind of person. And that's because like they've carefully constructed their story. And I have worked at lots of different brands. So I kind of understand the kind of importance, and I've built brands. And I think that's the whole bit, is like, if you're going to build a brand and you really genuinely want to make it successful, there has to be a really important purpose at the very core of it that you very genuinely can talk about, that means something to other people and resonates. And I've been in examples of businesses where they've got that totally right. It's like Virgin Atlantic. Who doesn't think that's the most rock star of all of the flights you would take over BA? You're like, well, which one feels like it's going to be cool and exciting? And that's because they've just built that in their DNA from day one. And I think actually it's a really, really hard art to get completely right. So I think it has to start with your purpose, why you're doing it, what your values are and what you stand for. And then you have to build your brand narrative out of that. And then the next step of that is, for me, then the branding, as it were, which is like, well, then how do you make something that's so beautiful to look at, that kind of meets an aesthetic that I suppose a lot of people enjoy? And that's the kind of creation of the brand. But I think that the two things only work when you have something that looks beautiful, but it's powered by the values and the purpose of what it's doing, that galvanizes people around it. Yeah. And I think that's, to me, I think, there's some amazing examples kind of it. And I think, I know Rebekah wants to chat about her favourite brand example.
Get in there first, though.
Get in there first. Well, I guess kind of, I suppose, like, and it's interesting because we were talking a little bit about our brands and kind of like the importance of community and the importance of kind of, I suppose, almost hype around it, which isn't about the ingredient, it's about the manifesto. And I would just say, for me, like, streetwear brands do an incredible job of building this real, like Supreme and Obey to me, like, I've had an obsession with for 20 years, right? I can't really work out why. It's because it's rooted in culture. It's rooted in this kind of world that I wish I'd been part of. And unfortunately, there I am in Cheltenham, not New York. But I might buy a jumper.
Very similar.
Exactly. And they've built a narrative, exactly, like one and the same person, but they've built a narrative. They've stayed true to their values, and then they've picked like-minded partnerships along the way. And they've kind of made sure they've always worked with the right people. They've never kind of, like, I suppose, sold out to a degree. And that's what keeps them in that really, really special place. And I think that, for me, that kind of hype around kind of like a brand like that is incredibly hard to get. And I think one thing that any marketeer for their entire career is like, I want to do that with something, which of course we're doing with Love Me and Few, right? Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. And to summarize, I think the things that resonated with me, it's almost, there's a kind of feeling, a personal connection to a brand that above anything comparable, other substitute products that you identify with. And then the logo and the name are just the sort of superficial elements of that and the embodiment of that, but it's more about how you identify with.
Yeah. I think it's good to am ever the realist in the group here, but building brand is bloody expensive. Yeah. And I think one of the problems that exists, a misnomer in young businesses, is that you can build a brand from nowhere on a shoestring. It doesn't really work like that. There's a reason why most of the iconic brands are owned by big consumer packaged goods groups, because they're very expensive to build. And if you look at the economics of luxury brands, there are very few luxury brands that make any money. Yet this brand asset, is so valuable for what it can inspire in people. Yeah. So I think it's a very expensive endeavor. And I think one of the things that we wanted to do in this business was build these iconic brands and build this sense of religion, community around these brands, but do it in a way that means that our capital can be channeled to that purpose rather than getting drawn to other parts of the value chain out of necessity. So that's really the beauty of what we're doing. So we have this sort of the magic of Fran in these brands that we're creating, but also a very grounded sense of value chain economics and how you make sure that you have enough resource to plow into that process. Because you would be on my case if you created these beautiful brands and I say, sorry, there's no money for you to go and get people excited about these things now. Because that's what happens most of the time in branded goods, right?
Yeah.
And also to that point, I think, if we were also building CBD brands that didn't have a purpose, I would really struggle to build that community and to get those people excited. Like, what we're trying to do is create something where people go, oh my God, I never knew how much I needed that. But of course I do, because this is so relatable to me. And I think that's what we've tried to do with both brands, to make them feel super relatable. It's almost like that kind of thing that you didn't realize how much you needed it. And we're suddenly like, well, of course, especially like with the menstrual cycle care brand. It's like, none of us are using those kind of products. But like, we should all be in charge of our bodies, because just think how super powerful we'll be when we do that. So that's kind of the proposition, is we're like, here we are, guys, here's something that you really need. And then it should bring the loyalty and the advocacy, because it's genuine. It isn't kind of like a forced.
And it's often when you think about brand, you think about the magic fairy dust. And one of the reasons I wanted Fran is because she has a really solid foundation in what's the data behind this. So show me why this brand should be positioned here, why we should be doing these things. Show me the research. Show me what consumers are buying. Because as an ex-banker, I find it quite hard to listen to the fluff, right? I need to know the facts as to why, if we're going to spend money on something, I need to know why we're going to do it. And that was one of the reasons that I really love working with Fran, is that there's a really solid grounding in why we're doing these things. Because if you're going to spend a lot of money, you need to know why you're spending it, right?
Absolutely.
And actually, just to add to that, flip it around and look at it from the side of a sort of an entrepreneur, or, they're out on the landscape. There are millions of startups and entrepreneurs trying to build their own businesses, which entail building brands. Worked with some of those before. I mean, Rebekah and I have been on a journey with Botanic Lab previously. But it's hard yards, right? It's very difficult to do. You can't get all parts of the value chain correct. And the beauty of Southwest Brands is we've picked exactly where we want to be, and we're laser focused on that. And I think we know how we want to operate and how we intend to deliver. The growth of this business over time, I mean, obviously we're not shy about our ambitions on where we'd like to go. Rebekah's talked about potentially looking at acquisitions of other brands to add to the portfolio. There is, just again from a capital markets background, looking at this, the industry is fragmented, right? The consumer is probably underserved in some of these categories, and not for necessarily lack of, knowledge on the side of the entrepreneurs bringing these brands to market, but just lack of capacity, lack of bandwidth, whether it's, capital, just resourcing, all sorts of things. And I do believe there is scope for, just a consolidation, a rationalization of the space where everyone just kind of majors in what they're good at and deliver it well. I think, and therein also lies, just another avenue of growth for the business, which I think will be very exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it goes to Rebekah's earlier point of sort of moving away from this vertically integrated model. And so you guys are wholly focused on that last mile, which is great. Thank you guys for the broad understanding of branding. Maybe we can drill down actually on CBD. What are some of the challenges specific to CBD in terms of branding? I mean, education is one that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, education is the one everyone always narrows in on, this sort of obsession that you can't say what it does, which I'm relatively blasé about, to be honest, because I don't think it's unique in certainly in food and drink. And I think people over obsess on that on the basis that there isn't kind of branded knowledge layered over the top of it. So you can't say what exactly what CBD does at the moment because there isn't enough research, but there's unlikely to be certified claims around that for at least another 5 to 10 years, I would think, if ever. So I don't think that that's a major limitation.
Can I just probe on that, actually? Yeah. I think I understand what you're saying. Do you not think the perennial issue with cannabis is the stigma and how much unlearning you need to do in relation to it?
Yeah, but that's a slightly different point, I think, because there's an education piece around what does this product do for me? And that's the bit that I don't think in the near future we're going to be able to say on pack, this will cure all ills. There's a separate piece, which is a societal piece, which is what is cannabis? What's it used for? I think we've come a huge way in that, certainly in the time I've been in the industry in the last 3 or 4 years. The Daily Mail rhetoric, as I call it, has shifted quite considerably in that time, especially in Europe, where, there is no rec market here. This is a health and wellness proposition. I think understanding has come along a huge way. There is more to do, but I think brand is the place to do that. When you see health and wellness brands making a big noise and products on shelf and promotion campaigns, people are going to start to understand when they see this in everyday, that education will come. So I don't think we need to over-engineer that process. So I don't see that as a big blocker. There are lots of restrictions around advertising, online advertising, paid for media. Again, I'm a bit of a pragmatist about this. Where there's money, it will happen. And, I think the big actors in the industry like Google, like Facebook, like others are starting to see that there is huge potential in this industry and unwinding some of those things. It's complex. It takes time and, we're going at pace, so we're going to have to work around some of those things, but they will unpick over time as the money flows start. We're seeing Amazon start to stock CBD products now. That's why this period of time right now, I think, is so exciting, because those big companies are starting to understand this industry, but we're, steps ahead in terms of our understanding. So there's this real window of opportunity for us before the industry is flooded by, these businesses that have a huge amount of power and a huge amount of money. So I almost see it as an opportunity rather than a blocker for the industry, that we have to find new and different ways of reaching consumers. And actually, the consumer industry moves so quickly, right? How you talk to a consumer today was not the same as 12 months ago. It's not even the same as 6 months ago. So, we just need to be at the front of that process, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's the whole, not leading on CBD, because I think sometimes that is a blocker for us, because there was such a big swell in the market, a lot of white label goods, they all look the same. Nothing looked very exciting, and actually not all of the product was great. And it really put a lot of people off. The amount of my friends that were like, I tried CBD, it doesn't work. It's really awful. Broke my heart, because I was working with amazing product that I really believed in, and I really believe in it as an industry. So I think kind of our approach of it looking like a consumer good. So if you're going to start using SPF, for example, we're having a big debate about this earlier, weren't we? Should you use SPF? Is it the right ingredient? Some of us are using it, some of us aren't. Why is that any different to CBD? CBD should be viewed as a holistic ingredient. It's ashwagandha, right? It should, I think, live in that realm. So actually what we're trying to do is all those amazing D2C brands that you see, like Supergoop, Sunday Riley, that are popping up, and we're obsessed with them off the hype of Glossier, another brilliant example of a brand built on community. Is that we want to kind of position ourselves there so that consumers are coming to us because they're like, this brand looks really exciting and interesting. Oh, and it's also got CBD in it. Oh, I didn't know about CBD, but it nourishes my skin. Oh, it can help with this and that, and kind of go from it from that positioning, I think actually gives us an amazing opportunity in the space.
And actually, I find nothing more frustrating than seeing another article in the paper that's like, oh, cannabis available in the Queen's shop or something. And it's like, it takes us back 10 years. It's like it's not interesting. It's like, it's old news, and it's just trading on this naughtiness factor.
Yeah.
I think we as an industry have to push on from there. We have to take the consumer on from there, because if we're going to keep going for these easy wins, we're not going to move this industry into a place where it is a proper consumer goods industry. So we need to take responsibility for that. You will not see any PR headlines like that from us.
Yeah. It needs to stop being so kind of salacious, because that's the thing, is it puts it back rather than being like, actually, this is a great ingredient that everybody can be using and works across like a whole kind of like, myriad of benefits.
Yeah. I mean, lazy puns are too regular still, aren't they, in terms of headlines, and the amount of times the word high gets used. It's quite irritating, isn't it?
It is,
I can't bear it.
It's a shame as well, because, I think the consumer is going to leapfrog where these kind of old-fashioned mindsets are still entrenched. And we see it in perhaps more conservative sectors. Like, for example, when, again, I speak with my finance hat on, but things like getting a bank account.
Yeah.
Things like getting insurance, when you say cannabis, they run for the hills. That's starting to change. We certainly have, and we just had a very constructive, discussion with a major bank quite recently. But these have been very fundamental challenges in the industry, and that perception really needs to change. And I say this as a born and raised Singaporean, where, drugs are just completely flat out illegal. This is illegal in my country, even CBD. But it's an issue. Right. And the reality is this narrative is inaccurate. It needs to change.
100%. I'm glad you're fighting the good fight. So I'm just conscious of time. So we'll kind of come to the end now, but let's look a bit at the future and maybe some of the interesting stuff that you're seeing in a more mature market like the US. Are you seeing things that you can take from what's happening there? Obviously, they've got recreational in a lot of states, but you see interesting things happening from a branding perspective in the States, or any innovations that you think are going to be useful over this side of the pond?
Yeah, I think the US in every category, consumer category, is the most interesting market for branded goods for obvious reasons. It's the trendsetter. But the UK is probably the most important market outside of the US, not from a volume perspective, but from a trend perspective. So we very much look to the US. We're having this conversation yesterday. I would say they are about 5 years ahead of us from a branded goods perspective in most categories, but including this one. But it is still a very fragmented market in the US because of a lot of the federal legislations haven't gone through yet. So I think we can take lessons from the US in terms of how they're positioning product, how they're branding product. There's some really cool brands over there and doing a lot of the things that we're talking about. And we like a lot of those brands. But there isn't a major standout brand in the US. And therein lies an opportunity, right? Because I think that is going to change over the course of the next few years. And certainly if you get a consumer brand into retail in the US, the volume potential, to state the obvious, is huge. So you probably can gather from that we are quite interested in the US as well. But Asia is also a hugely interesting market. It's, it's much further behind, but starting to realize the potential of these ingredients, a powerhouse economically as well. So we're not Europe-centric, and Europe, I think, has its own challenges because of the lots of different countries, lots of different socio-economic situations, lots of different rules between them. So in a way, some of those opportunities outside of the UK and Europe present a kind of bigger opportunity for us. So I think, yes, there are lots of branded examples we like in the US, and we will very much be drawing on. From a product innovation perspective, I think my personal view is that this is new enough for the consumer right now. A lot of people say, you're going to start using CPG, are you, those kind of things. I think let's get this right first. Let's get the consumer on this journey first. Everyone gets very excited about sort of different delivery systems and those kind of things. It's not really my bag, to be honest. We're about brand and product. So I think, that's where we'll be focusing our attention.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, lots of exciting things ahead for you guys. I'd like to have you guys back on at some point. This has been by far the most fun episode I've recorded. And I mean, genuinely, it's just so nice to be able to do it in the room together. Yeah. It's a different kind of energy. So I'm really grateful to all of you for joining me. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Pleasure.